today we're going to be learning about how to throw a single man ladder per Vandenberg. So the first position that he's going to want to get into is what we call the ladderman's position. Will you demonstrate for that, Gonzo?
Ladderman's position.
So from here, we'll just go over a quick synopsis of what this ladder consists of. This section here is the fly section. This here is the bed section. This is the head of the ladder. Down at the very bottom is the foot of the ladder. These are called rungs. This is the halyard. When you isolate one section of the bed, it is now called the beam. So this is one beam, this is one beam. Together they form the bed section. So, moving on, what this firefighter will do is he will put the ladder of the position into the beam section. So,
Beam. Ladder.
from here, this firefighter has to raise to a high shoulder carry. In doing so, he will move his body to this section of the ladder, to the head of the ladder, and he will do a rotating movement that will allow the ladder to raise onto his right shoulder carry. The term is called raise to a high shoulder carry.
Raise to a high shoulder carry. Clear above. Ladder.
What we'd like to add is that anytime the ladder is doing a vertical movement, you must clear above, because there might be overhead hazards, whether it's an electrical line or whatnot. So what he found himself doing is when he got to this section of the ladder, he counted from the first rung in between the 6th and 7th rung. Putting himself in this position allows him to find the perfect balance point. His right hand is securely underneath the bottom side of the beam, and his other left hand is above the beam. Go ahead and raise. Notice how he did a nice squatting position. If he hadn't have done that, he's putting too much pressure on his spine. So from here, he's going to go forward ladder, and he's going to set himself up for spot beam raise. What he's going to do is he's going to pick a specific location to get himself in a position to be able to raise that ladder in a good distance from the building. So go ahead and forward ladder.
Forward. Ladder. Spot for beam raise. Clear above.
Again, he said clear above for overhead hazards.
Ladder. Vertical ladder.
Notice, as soon as that ladder went vertical, he instantly goes and puts the ladder. In a windy situation, had he not done that, the wind could take this ladder and allow both the beams to walk on itself, causing it to fall. From here, he's going to want to pivot on one beam. Depending on how close he is to the building, he might pivot on this beam or he might pivot on this beam. Depending on which one he wants to do, he will tap this beam or vice versa, and he will say pivot on this beam either away or towards me, knowing that he has to have this halyard section always facing towards him and away from the building. The fly section will be facing towards the building. Fly, bed, halyard.
Pivot ladder. This side's going to stay. This side's going to be going away from me. Clear above.
Again, he says clear above.
Ladder.
The whole time he's footing that bottom section. So from here, because he's in the grass section, the ladder is slightly leaning. So he might want to walk it either forward or slightly backwards to get himself out of a dugout position. So go ahead. Meanwhile, he is footing it while he's doing that, so he still has full control over the ladder. Once the firefighter is in a complete area where he feels comfortable, he will then go on to the next step where he will be calling it extend ladder. Now there's two other sections that he has to remember in doing so. He will say extend ladder, extend, clear above, because remember the ladder is doing a vertical movement. After that, he will also say fingers and toes. When doing that, it'll be a simultaneous movement where his knee will come around, his knee will lock in here, his foot will wrap around here. When he's ready, he'll extend the ladder. But remember, he has those 3 commands that he has to tell himself and everyone else around him before he can execute that position.
Extend ladder. Clear above. Fingers and toes. Ladder.
ladder is locked in here and his elbows are here. Go ahead. Pause. His elbows and his forearms slightly lean onto the ladder. Now, Gonzo, will you demonstrate pushing the ladder away from you? Notice if he loses the ladder starting to go this way, he has full control by using the ladder to push right back into his forearms. He can allow it to lean towards him and away from him. The whole time he has full control over it because his knee is locked, his foot is wrapped around, it cannot slide out from underneath of him, and if it gets too much top heavy, his forearms are there to protect himself. Meanwhile, his thumbs are down. If you want to bring the camera over to this side. His thumbs are always facing down, and his hands are on the halyard, and his hands will not slip from the halyard, will not remove from the halyard until that ladder is at a vertical point where he feels comfortable at lowering it into the building. So what we'll do from here, if you want to step back, he's going to raise the ladder to a certain spot where he feels that he will have enough clearance to raise the ladder 3 to 5 rungs above the lip of the building. So go ahead and demonstrate that, Gonzo. So from there, he has to confirm one thing. If you bring the camera in, this is a crucial point because these, what we didn't describe earlier, these are called dogs. This section right here and this section right here. These sections have to lock in place in order for the ladder to be lowered in. This is preventing the ladder from sliding down the fly section, coming down and breaking toes and fingers. So he has another command that he has to do. It's called lower in. When he does that, he will say lower in, clear above, and he will execute.
Dogs locked. Lowered in, clear above.
In that time, his foot will instantly go from, as he's lowering into the building, his foot will go from that knee lock onto the first rung, and he will allow that building, or allow the ladder to slowly go into the building, saying 3, 2, 1, contact.
Lowering in, clear above, ladder. 3, 2, 1, contact.
As you can see up above, he perfectly positioned it so he'd have 3 rungs. 3 rungs is the sweet spot. However, you are allowed to have 4 to 5. The reason we do that is for a ladderman to be able to climb, ascend the ladder, and descend the ladder. And the whole time he'll have control over those top rungs when he goes to climb it and jump off the ladder onto the building and vice versa, coming back onto the ladder. So from here, per Vandenberg, this section is now what we called the fly section. We remember that from the introduction before. This section has to be facing out. So what he will do, he will perform a roll. The term is called a roll because he will foot one section, and in the meantime, he will roll the ladder onto the bed section, and the fly section will be facing out. So he will demonstrate how to do that, and we'll do it slow so we can see it in real time, and his arms will be doing a switch, and his feet will be doing a switch.
Roll louder, right, clear above, ladder.
Notice his foot goes instantly to the side that he's rolling, and then what he'll do is he'll roll this side to this beam will come to his chest, and he will tightly snug it into between his chest. Notice that the beam section is tight into his chest. He's at this point he can now keep putting it with your right foot. His foot's still footing the beam side of the section. Now he can release his arms, and the ladder is not going anywhere because he has full pressure onto this beam. Go ahead and put him back on. This is the section where he will switch his arms. This hand will go here, this hand will go here, and in that time it'll be a simultaneous motion where his left foot now comes to footing the beam section, and his right foot will remove back. Keep in mind the whole time he's looking up. The reason we constantly always look up is because 1 to 2 inches down here, if you're looking at this section, 1 to 2 inches means 6 to 7 inches up top. We're always focusing on the top side of the ladder because that's where the hazard's at, whether or not it slides. Like I said, 1 to 2 inches down here, more than likely means 6 to 7 inches up above. So now that he's rolled this ladder, he's still footing the ladder because we don't want it to slide out from underneath of us. He has the fly section facing out. He has the bed section facing in. From here, he will tie his halyard.
Just
Tie it first. This knot is called a clove hitch. What this is now doing is tightly securing this section, the fly section, in place, along with the safety procedures of the dogs. So not only do we have the dog sections locked, but we have the halyard tied. So at this point, this section, this fly section, cannot release down and slide down and release. From here, this position, the firefighter might want to adjust his angle because the key angle is in between 70 and 75 degrees. So if he wants to adjust this section, how do you feel about that section?
I want to adjust.
The firefighter wants to adjust, so he will get into the position of adjustment. Do you want to come over here? The first key thing that he wants to realize is that this beam section is tightly secured in his groin. The other section is here, his hand. He does not want his hand below here because for some reason, even though we have our halyard tied and the dog's locked, for some reason, if this section wanted to come sliding down, his thumbs and his fingers would not be at risk. So just for safety procedures, he'll keep his hand up here and his bottom hand down here, he never wraps his thumb. If he were to wrap his thumb and this section for some reason and his halyard wasn't tied, the fly section can come sliding down, causing the firefighter to break his thumb. So from here, he will not wrap his thumb, and what he will do is he will either pick a section. A good tip is that wherever his foot is where the back end of the foot section will end up going. So if the firefighter wants to adjust out, he puts his foot in a position somewhere in this area where he can just adjust to his foot. The whole time he says clear above, and the whole time he's looking up. When he's adjusting, if he wanted to move the ladder to this section, it's the same concept of moving a patient on a backboard. It's a seesaw movement. So up, side,
adjust. Clear above. Ladder.
So the firefighter has adjusted his ladder. He will check it to see if that's the angle he likes. For the video purposes, we're not going to check his angle, but like I said, I'll repeat it again. The angle is from 70 degrees to 75 degrees. So once he's ready to climb the ladder, he will go to the side of the ladder and he will say ladder ready to climb. He doesn't have to say it for this purpose, and then the instructor will come over, he will check his halyard, he will check his angle, and then he will ask him to remove the ladder. So his first step in doing so, he has to untie his halyard. Untie the halyard.
Untie. Halyard.
Notice where he keeps the halyard because the firefighter knows that he's going to have to go into a roll position. If he were to have the halyard down here, that becomes a hazard. So he just tightly, kind of just loosely lays the halyard inside here because that way it's out of the way and it's not going to be a hazard for it getting snagged up on anything else. So from here, the firefighter will do the roll again.
Roll ladder, left. Clear above. Clear behind.
Notice he says clear behind this time because anytime the ladder is now moving away from the building, we now have hazards behind us.
Ladder.
Notice how he's consistently looking up the entire time. His foot just switched. He still has control fully of the ladder. Get it back, get it back, get it back. And he will continue on with his roll. His arm switch. From here, now he's back into the original position where before he lowered into the building. His fly section is towards the building, his bed section is away from the building, and now he has full access to his halyard. So the next step this firefighter will do is he will remove the ladder from the building. In doing so, the only thing that's changed is now that the ladder is now moving away from the building, we now might have individuals that are still working behind us or hazards behind us that if the ladder, when it's vertical, may fall backwards. He wants to make that hazard known and aware.
Remove. Clear above.
So, good.
Clear behind.
When he wants to remove the ladder, his foot, whatever one he wants to choose, his foot will go to the rung. He will lightly pull on the ladder, and when the ladder is vertical, he'll say ladder high. When he does that, the ladder will go vertical. It's a simultaneous motion as it's coming off the building. He will go right back into that knee lock position to have it securely in place.
Remove. Ladder. Ladder high.
So now, the firefighter now needs to lower the fly section. The correct term for that is called retracting ladder. In that, he will say retract, clear above, fingers and toes, ladder.
Retract. Clear above. Fingers and toes. Ladder.
He will move the dogs up above the rung and then allow it to lower below him. At any point where it gets uncomfortable, you can always pause and allow the ladder to get restfully back in that balanced position. From here, he will say dogs locked or dogs locked. When he looks below, he will constantly be looking up. He will say dogs locked, asking himself the question, are they locked? He will look down then at the dogs and confirm that they were locked.
Dogs locked. Locked.
When he says dogs locked and he's confirmed that the dogs are locked, he has now given himself permission to release from the halyard and now grab the beams. He is still in the knee lock position. His arms are still on the beams, slightly just about his ear length height. He still has full control of the ladder. From here, he needs to retract from the movements that he did previously, raising the ladder, and he will have to pivot. So he will choose whether he wants to pivot on this beam or this beam. Whichever one, he will then say the other beam away or towards me.
Pivot. This beam's gonna stay. This beam's gonna come towards me. Clear above. Ladder.
Notice the whole time he's still footing it as he pivots that beam. From here, this firefighter will want to lower to a high shoulder carry. The best technique for doing that is picking the next rung from his eyesight above. If you pan the camera over here, over to this section, this hand, his right hand, will then come over to this hole. Because we've decided that we want to go one rung above, this will be his point of action where he will raise this hand to this section. Now when he lowers, this hand will not move. This hand will stay in place covering this hole, and all he has to do is slightly lower it while his left hand slides up the ladder. This puts himself in the position in between that 6th and 7th rung, which is the balance point. So he will switch his feet. He will put his hand on that hole. His hand will then slide up above, and he will be perfect in the position of lowering to a high shoulder carry.
Lower to a high shoulder carry. Clear above. Clear. Ladder.
His hand goes to that rung. His feet will switch, and all he has to do is lower the ladder onto his shoulder. Notice how his hand's not moving. However, his left hand is slightly sliding up. Is now resting on his shoulder. All he has to do is squat. From here, this firefighter will need to move the ladder either left or right. For this purpose, he will be going right. He will say right, ladder, ladder coming around.
Right, ladder. Ladder come around. Forward, ladder. Ladder coming through. Ladder right, ladder.
This next movement is very similar to the spot beam raise. However, the firefighter will not be raising the beam. This next term is called ground ladder because naturally you want to put it on the ground. So ground, ladder.
Ground, ladder.
He'll dig his foot into the ground. He pauses in place and he walks back up to the head of the ladder. Go ahead. Until he gets to either the second or first rung. From there, he will do his rotate. He will slightly come back maybe 1 to 2 rungs. And now we want to bed the ladder because this is the bed section.
Bed, ladder.
And that's throwing a single man ladder for Vandenberg.